So it's no longer enough just to optimize your own website to get cited. It's now imperative to make sure your brand is mentioned and vouched for by other external publications.
Is dire. If you run a company right now, no matter what you've done before, you might be invisible. Luckily for you and for me, we've got a man who really has a plan and a service that can solve that. I'm joined by Farzad Rashidi, who's in Washington, D.C. Farzad, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back on, Jim. It's a pleasure.
So many companies are becoming invisible, and I know you to be an authority in this domain, so I couldn't imagine anyone I'd rather have. Farzad, what about this research that's showing that most companies are basically sailing out to sea with no lights on when it comes to customers?
Absolutely. So, that's, I don't think is very surprising. If you ask any LLM, hey, what are the best X, Y, Z service or tool or product for my use case? At max, it gives you a dozen brands. And likely there are thousands of different brands that don't get ever mentioned in the answer. So usually the customer research process starts from an LLM response. So whether or not they're using their ChatGPT, Claude, or just typing in Google, usually that initial list of research is generated by LLM. So if you're not in that initial list of 5 or 10 or dozen brands, then usually you're not even entering the consideration stage at all. So it's key to make sure you're mentioned at that top of funnel. And then obviously people do their own research to figure out what product to purchase. But that first step is key.
So tell us about Respona, the history of Respona, and how you're helping clients to solve this problem now of really LLM invisibility.
Sure thing. So Respona in a nutshell helps brands show up in AI answers, like in Claude, ChatGPT, and Google AI overviews, by getting them listed on product reviews, listicles, other articles that listed basically the top brands in their space. And the way we're accomplishing this is by reaching out to authority publications that are currently getting cited by these LLMs, and then incentivizing them to promote your brand and talk about your brand from a content piece that is optimized in order to get cited. So that way you see that visibility score take off over time.
And I have found in the last month that an article that I wrote that has the top 14 video platforms for entrepreneurs is the number one source of traffic to my newsletter. What is the LLM doing then in real time, going out and checking all these websites like my unnoticedentrepreneur.com or Fortune or entrepreneur.com?
Yeah, absolutely. So what these LLMs do is that they usually are a neural network that has a cutoff when it comes to their training. So with that latest and best models usually have a cutoff point of a few months ago. So their information inherently is not up to date. So what all LLMs have done in order to battle that is that they basically have turned into a search engine. So when you ask any questions that requires a model to know the latest information, what it does is that it conducts this process is called RAG, which essentially is just searching the web and figuring out what other articles are currently that they can read that's been published since after their training date cut off, that they can reference in order to come up with an up-to-date and useful response. So what brands can do when you ask it a question, for example, hey, what are the best tennis shoes for playing tennis? Is that if you actually look at the model behavior, is that it actually goes and reads usually dozens of sources, reputable sources in that space. And there are usually a lot of people think, oh, it's from other people's websites, like from our competitors' websites, from my own website. Usually we see 85% are actually from external websites. So it's no longer enough just to optimize your own website to get cited. It's now imperative to make sure your brand is mentioned and vouched for by other external publications.
So that's a really, really key point for anyone that's contemplating this. what Farzad has just said is that your own website really may not even need tending at all. That you're really needing to do what in the old days was PR, was to have the authority of a third-party website, Farzad, right? So how does then link building and, as you call it, sort of digital brand mentions compare to what we would have called public relations in the old days?
Right. Well, the gist of it is that they all follow the same principle. You're trying to get external validation, right? So it's one thing if I say, "Hey, we're the best for this," it means nothing. So, but when somebody else says it and they are an authoritative source in your space, that means something. So that's the basis of how all of these search engines work. Back in the day, when Google, beat all the other search engines, was by developing this algorithm called PageRank. So instead of just looking at the keywords on the homepage or the website, because you can easily manipulate that by keyword stuffing, and that's how Google became Google, is by looking at other sources. So this concept of backlinks got introduced. So the more authoritative websites in your space link back to your website or mention you and talk about you, it essentially passes along what we call link equity, or considered like a vote to popularity. And that's what pushes the websites up in the search ranks. Now, the same principles also apply for LLM mentions, is that the more you're vouched for and talked about by other reputable publications, the more likely it is that you show up in the answer. But there are some nuances to that. So I'm happy to dive into it if that makes sense.
What does that mean in terms of getting their brand onto one of these? Because historically, those bigger websites will only take news or articles or mentions from big brands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So a lot of people think that I need to get, like, for example, Forbes to mention me, or I need to go on Reddit. So if you actually look at the percentage of citations, for example, Reddit is right around 5 or less of the citations. The vast majority of sources that get cited by these LLMs are actually not popular sources that you have heard of. And the reason why is that there's something called topical authority for a publication. So when a website writes about anything and everything, like a news site like Forbes, they're not a topical expert on anything. That website doesn't have a focus. They're writing about lifestyle and celebrity net worth and also B2B SaaS. So the type of domains that we see to actually get cited by these LLMs are websites that are usually other companies that have a blog or they have a content piece published on a website that's writing about a topic that they're an expert at. And so those are the type of citations and mentions you want to go after. It's not necessarily chasing after, just doing PR for the sake of, like, doing a study and then publishing it on publications. I found little evidence and correlation between those. And what I found that works well, and that's something that we help direct our clients to, is by analyzing the current citation tool for LLMs being used by these LLMs, and then you replicate what already works. So I'm happy to dive into that.
Yeah. So I mean, I know we're getting a bit technical, but it's fascinating because it's changing the game entirely. And one of the dimensions to what you said is that in the PR business, which I had for 25 years in agency, clients focused really on the high profile publication that the CEO read.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of. So you're on the correct path. Let me just adjust it a little bit. So we usually see there are not news articles most of the time at all. Like, look at paid advertising, TV advertising, PR. So when you whittle it down to SEO or GEO, that's what people call it, which is for search engine optimization, or some people call it generative engine optimization, that's a different marketing channel.
Right.
The way these engines work is basically, if you want to show up in those answers, you need to go and be placed where they are looking. So what happens is that, and it varies usually based on the industry. So what you would need to do is to run the prompts you want to optimize for. Like in your case would be, what are the best marketing podcasts for entrepreneurs?
Mhm.
You run that prompt through any of the LLMs you want to optimize for, and then take a look at the citations that show you where they're pulling their answers from. And then what you want to do is to replicate that citation tool. So not to do any guesswork, is to actually go and see, okay, what are the type of domains and the type of content that the LLM is searching for? So in that model's chain of thought, what are the questions it's asking? What are some of the content pieces it's referencing? And on what type of domains? And then what usually happens is that a lot of people try to get themselves cited on those specific citations that they pull. So they're trying to outreach, but obviously success rate on those are low. So what we've seen that works really well is actually find similar publications that follow the same structure of keyword pattern and authority, and then write a new piece of content that follows the structure that exists in citation. So once these new articles go live and get indexed, they end up replacing a lot of the older citations. You see that visibility score go up.
So a key part of what you're doing as a Respona is helping people to understand which publishing websites they need to be on, because those are the ones that the LLMs are tracking. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that right?
absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
So,
And you do that within the platform, presumably. Within Respona, people type in what their domain is, what their product is, and their avatar is. Is that right?
yeah. So actually, if you don't mind, I could show you.
Yeah. Let's go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, in preparation for our meeting, I
Oh, good.
have run a search for the Unnoticed Entrepreneur podcast.
Oh, perfect. Do you
So
want to share? Do you like to share screen? Oh, good. You can share screen. Perfect. Oh, that's great.
absolutely. So basically, I just put in your website here, the unnoticed.cc, and I put in some prompts here that the model suggested. Like, for example, what are the best marketing podcasts for entrepreneurs? What business podcasts, tech, practical branding and visibility, practical branding and visibility strategies. Then I put in the models you care about. So that's Google, ChatGPT, Google AI overviews. Now, what we give you in the second step is your current state of visibility as a baseline.
Well, that's
So
terrible, though. I'm glad that for people that are listening, it's great. For the people that are watching, you can see that it's pretty poor.
there's a lot of room to grow here. But yeah, absolutely. So as you see, there's a lot of podcasts that are getting mentioned, like Marketing School and Neil Patel, Masters of Scale.
Okay.
And you deserve to be on there. So essentially what we do is we run these prompts through the models, and then we take a look and see if they are mentioned. And we pull all the citations that the model is using in order to drive that answer. So a lot of it is like 13 best podcasts for entrepreneurs to listen to, best branding podcasts, etc. And we enrich that by the type. And so we see exactly the type of domain they are. And then what we do in the last, so this is where a lot of tools stop, by the way. So they're like, oh, okay, great. What am I doing with this information? So what Respona does is that we actually run all these prompts and filter out these citations to the editorial links.
Right.
So for example, in this case, this is a article on Sales Flare on top 20 podcasts for startup founders in 2026. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually reach out to Salesflare and see if they'll be interested in adding you on there. A lot of the times, though, they're not interested. So they don't respond, or there may be a competing company. So what we do in majority of cases, we actually find similar publications to Salesflare that match their metrics and keyword profile. And then we write a new piece of content that follows the structure of the citation. So it would be top 20 plus podcasts for startup founders in 2026. And then we write an updated list that includes your podcast at the top, along with a backlink pointing to your website. So it still carries that same traditional SEO benefit, but more importantly, it has your brand. Now, what we see, because those publications are high authority, they basically have the opportunity to get to replace a lot of the older citations, because these LLMs are always hungry for new updated pieces of content. That's the whole point of them even looking at the citations. So that's how we see that visibility score tick up over time, is by helping you get placed on these type of publications that get cited.
Farzad, that's fascinating. So for anyone, obviously, that's listening, this video will be on the YouTube. And of course, Farzad will give you a link at the end of the show as well to connect with Farzad. But what we've then got is a high domain authority website. I know that my current website domain authority is 31, for example, right? But it's not showing up on any of the LLMs. So it's somehow not being cited, even though it's in the top 6 in the UK and top 2% worldwide, as shows it's invisible, which is fascinating because although it's done its work in some domains, it's completely useless in others. First of all, why would they not want to get an updated article?
Well, Jim, how many emails do you get on a daily basis?
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and actually I get them for people that want to place a backlink article on my website, and I've said no because I haven't really understood what was going to happen.
Right, exactly.
And so there's also ignorance, right, on the behalf of the publisher. Like me, you think, am I going to get hacked in some way, right, by publishing this? So that's a very interesting.
Right. So usually success rate on just reaching out to the raw current citation pool has very limited success. So that's a very contrarian thing. And unless you do it in practice, it differs from what you would think would happen. So you're basically when you do any sort of cold outreach to people that you have never heard of, the success rate usually hovers around 1%.
Yes.
So if you have a handful, for example, you have 400 citations to reach out to, if you're lucky, you may be able to convert 3 or 4 of them to say yes. But that will do nothing. It's not enough to move the needle. So what we found that works well is to create a pool of opportunities for each one of those citations to find similar publications, write new pieces of content following the structure, but then those new citations end up replacing a lot of the older citations. 45% of citations usually basically cycle through every month.
Yeah.
So
okay, and so that's interesting. That's an interesting statistic that 45% refreshing every month, which means 2 things. One is it's never too late to start, and the second is that you have to keep going. Right.
You do have to keep going. It's not a one-off strategy, only company that is doing this. So the more of your competitors that are following this strategy, then the more competitive your space gets and the more you have to follow. So it's definitely something that requires upkeep and something you have to do consistently over time. Just like any other marketing strategy, it's not free to get placed on organic search results. But when you do make it work, you have an evergreen flow of customers coming to you that are already qualified, they're ready to purchase, and they already have established trust in you because they already have, been recommended to you or recommended to them by an LLM. So usually the conversion rate on those leads are way, way higher than what you would get through ads or any other channel.
Oh, that's very interesting, Farzad. So a couple of things there. You mentioned cost. I looked up what value would be if I charged for the unnoticedentrepreneur.com, and it was about $30 to $40 was the value that one of these LLMs gave me for my domain for posting something to pursue this link building strategy. How does that work?
Yep. So that depends on how competitive I would say the industry is. And so for us, what we do is we have a flat rate price per placement. So we take care of the whole thing. It's a done for you service from start to finish. And the pricing is pay per placement. So it's guaranteed placements. It starts from $100 per placement and all the way up to $500 per placement. And when you place an order, you can actually select the quality tier you like to get a placement on. When we run our own analysis, we give you an action plan that gives you exactly how many brand mentions you need in what quality tier. So it's not guesswork. You're basically going off of the plan.
Okay, so is it $100 to get one, but the ROI of that could be that you're then found in an LLM, or do you have some target that you need to do 5 or 6 or 10?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no minimum. One thing, so for each set of prompts, when we run the analysis, we tell you exactly how many citations we need to go and replicate. And then we will calculate the total cost, depending on how many prompts you want to optimize for, how many models you want to optimize for. If you want to start with just one model, one prompt is much less expensive. And if you want to shoot for the stars and go after more keyword or more prompts and more models, and obviously it's going to cost more. So when it comes to Respona, we have a flat rate price per placement. And then when you place your order or when you create a campaign, we actually give you how much exactly it's going to cost to get ranked and maximize your visibility. So your monthly budget essentially determines how long that's going to be. So if you're spending like $1,000 a month, it's going to take a number of years. If you're spending, 5 to 10 grand a month, it's going to take a few months. So that's again just for these set of prompts and these set of models, but every business is different. So if you're looking to just basically optimize for one or two prompts and your small business, then you can start small. And then if you're a larger business with a bigger budget, you can go after much more competitive prompts.
It doesn't have to be that it's only for big players, because if that's the case, then the playing field is completely not level anymore.
Right. It's never been level.
Okay.
Bigger
Bumpy.
brands always take the cake.
Yeah.
But in terms of small businesses, what the competitive advantage you have is that you could go after some of the non-competitive prompts. If you want to compete for what are the best CRM in the market, yeah, Salesforce and HubSpot, they're going to kick your butt.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you're going after, for example, hey, what are the best CRMs for home improvement businesses in the UK? Then that's a much more manageable thing to optimize for, because then they're not the Salesforce of the world that are competing for that. So you can definitely dominate that with a very small budget in a short period of time.
Farzad, I think you've hit on something really, really important there, which is the segmentation. So that, as you say, your prompt can be as defined as possible for your ICP, even, I guess, down to geography and ICP. And it, I suppose, is almost infinitely filterable, your prompt, right?
Absolutely.
Is that what we define as a prompt?
Yeah, so it would be a question. And the main thing we're optimizing for is the intent, not that specific prompt, because no two persons are going to be typing the same exact query. So traditional search, you're optimizing for keywords. With LLMs, you're optimizing for intent. So for example, if I'm optimizing for what are the best home improvement CRMs in the UK, now, if somebody's asking an LLM, hey, I run a window replacement company and I'm based out of the UK, what are the best CRMs I should use? It will be optimized for that as well. So essentially, we are optimizing for intent, not specific prompts, but that would basically give us the guidance we need to go after the type of citations that will get you placed on those group of prompts.
Okay, that's very interesting. And you also mentioned the need to optimize for different LLMs. Do you want to just explain that dimension to this? Because that potentially means you could have the same campaign, but I guess certainly you've got Gemini, Claude, GPT, Copilot, and then possibly Manus if you're, going down that path, and Grok, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we usually recommend Google AI Overviews, Claude, and ChatGPT, and they're usually the main ones we're going to optimize for. But obviously, when you do take a look at responses from like Perplexity, Copilot, etc., they also usually follow similar patterns of citations.
Right.
So they end up they work in very similar ways. But if you care about certain models, that usually ends up determining the tracking and determining that North Star metric. So if you care about showing up in ChatGPT, Claude, and Google AI Overviews, which is what most people use, usually that will also help your Perplexity to go up as well. So they kind of help each other. It's kind of a tide that raises all.
Okay, good. So it's not as though you're having to spend on one platform and another one is a greenfield campaign.
True. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Because when you and I spoke a couple of years ago, you kindly gave me access to Respona, and my own admission was I couldn't really figure out how it worked. So the human in the loop in this case, which is why now I'm still at 0, of course, on your metrics. What help do you actually give your clients to figure this out, or not to figure it out, just to get the result?
Absolutely. We definitely struggle with that. When we had a do-it-yourself average software, you had to hire staff that knew what they were doing, and you had to, manage them and use it on a daily. And it's a lot of work. So what we did at Respona last year is that we developed this in AI, and also with the network we built, we actually built this into a done-for-you productized service. So you can kind of consider it like a vending machine for brand mentions. So you can go in there like, I want one listicle mention on a publication of this quality tier. And we take care of the whole thing. So we filter out the publications, we go after them, we know what to say, we already have relationships with a ton of them, and also write the content that is optimized and get your brand placed from A to Z, and it's done for you. And then it ends up being way cheaper than you trying to do it in-house, because when you take into account your time, the publisher fees, and software tools you need, it ends up being significantly more expensive. Like one case study actually I'd like to highlight, if you scroll all the way up at the top of the
Yep.
page, is with Opus Clip. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
absolutely.
So Opus goes on at respona.com. There are some case studies here. Do you want to talk about the Opus Clip one? Because it's a pretty
Sure.
impressive headline.
Yeah, that's the newest one. So they came to us last year, and they had some foundation level visibility, but they were nowhere near the top. So we help them now rank number one in their space when it comes to the group of prompts
Which is
that are
video
relevant to
editing,
them.
which is AI video editing is a very competitive space too,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, indeed. And then basically, what we help them do is to analyze the citations for their target prompts. And then we created brand mentions for them on reputable publications that follow the patterns of those citations. And then now they're ranked number one in their space, and also added at 100,000 to the monthly visitors each month, because these brand mentions are still do follow backlinks to help with your traditional SEO. So you're kind of hitting two birds in one stone. So not only you're increasing your brand visibility and AI answers, but you're also showing up in organic search results in Google, other search engines as well.
You've got that's Opus Clip. Then you've also got here some agencies using the product, I guess, to serve their clients. And Matchmaker, which we know, of course, is in the podcast space. They've got a 90% reduction in the time it took to do outreach. So that's been a lot quicker, right? And then also you've got a fitness network, Generation Iron. They've got a 100,000 monthly organic traffic increase in 6 months, which, for a local business is a significant uplift, isn't it, Farzad? I'd have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're a global brand, so they're not a local business. Again, these numbers might look daunting for a small company, and I might be listening. We have companies that are one-person shows, and they're happy to dominate. They're happy to get a few hundred visitors to their website a month. And we have global brands that spend over $1 million a year with us, and agencies that sort of upsell what we do and then resell to their clients. So we have people from all walks of life that use the system. Again, the fundamentals are the same. If you're a bigger brand, you're just going after more competitive prompts and keywords. And if you're a smaller brand, you're going after smaller, less competitive niches.
How would a founder start this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually a good starting point is to start with a small test order just to try out the system. So what my recommendation is always is to start with a small test order. Let us build a few listicles for you. Kind of go through the process. It's going to cost maybe a few $100s, but that will give you the confidence to know if that's the type of service you want to utilize. And then if so, then we have, obviously AI visibility campaigns that you can run on a recurring basis that basically helps you put together a more long-term plan. But usually a good starting point is to go in there, submit a small test order, just let us build a couple of listicles for you so you get exactly what we are going to give you.
Okay. And we've talked really sort of more B2B. What about companies that are in the B2C space that maybe don't have a website, but maybe have a product, like my wife has teapots that she imports from China but they're only on Shopify.
Uh-huh.
So what can you help with that kind of company as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to e-commerce, I actually went through this last night. Like I've been playing tennis for a few years and I wanted to find a new pair of tennis shoes because I've been happy with mine, but I've been looking for a new pair. And I was like, let me do some research. So I just asked Claude, hey, find me the best tennis shoe for my, for a male 28-year-old. And so it gave me an option, and I actually put an order immediately. I didn't even do any more research. I just trusted it blindly and then placed the order. So that's the type of product that obviously, again, if their customers are searching and asking LLMs, hey, I want teapots, beautiful teapots, like where would I buy one? Then that would be something that could be beneficial to them. Obviously, I'm pretty confident that's probably a little less competitive than tennis shoes. So it might not require as large of a budget as, probably Asics or Adidas has to spend in order to show up with those answers.
Okay. So what's coming to me, a couple of things. One is that this isn't really optional. Everyone has to think about this off-site visibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the old days that you needed to make sure your own site was perfectly SEO'd with new articles and probably a nice logo, and you worried about the fonts and so on, that's not the place to be worried anymore, right?
Absolutely.
That we then need to be generating quality content for someone else to be willing to house it, right?
100%.
And with that content, are you writing that with AI, or are you writing that as humans, or is that a mixture?
Yeah, everything we do is a mixture of humans and AI. AI is great at certain things. It's not at a point yet to deliver the type of quality that we look for. So we definitely have humans at every step of the process that quality assure everything. So that's why we want to make sure that every customer is happy with all the deliverables. So we have a team built out to make sure everything is double checked.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is multilingual as well, right? The same principles apply regardless.
Globally. Exactly.
What about video and images? Is off-page search only text, or is it also applying to your YouTube videos and other formats?
Yeah, so the YouTube videos definitely get cited by LLMs. Social links like Reddit also get listed. But usually they're a very small minority of mentions. The vast majority of them are going to be those editorial pieces that I mentioned. But with that said, it doesn't stop you from creating YouTube videos, doesn't stop you from engaging in social. So again, these are other marketing channels that help, but the vast majority of the work, it's kind of like 80-20, is going to be mainly working on those external citations and brand mentions.
Authority website
Mm-hmm.
to have like an editorial website. I'm just about the unnoticedentrepreneur.com, 45 articles on there that I've painstakingly written over the last few years. Is the opportunity for people who are entrepreneurs to actually build out a website that's almost in parallel to their business website, which includes their own products and listicles, that becomes a source for backlinks? Is that something that people are thinking about as a strategy?
Usually having one more site is more trouble than it's worth, because one citation is not going to do anything. So having to invest that much time and effort building out another website, you're better off just reaching out to other publications. So that's usually not something I would recommend.
Okay, I'm going to edit this question out of the podcast.
No worries.
That was a dumb question. All right, it was just a thought.
No worries.
Okay, so Farzad, it sounds as though everyone has to think about this, that Respona's got a product, and I've seen it because I remember a couple of years ago you were doing link builder. It sounds like now you're doing brand authority, and it's really moved on quite a bit. As an entrepreneur, just share with us what's been a learning in the last couple of years with the changes that are coming in with AI. What's your experience and your advice to entrepreneurs that are grappling with what's happening?
It's completely getting revolutionized. And one thing that we've seen a lot of success with is productized service. I think Sequoia just put out an article that says the next $1 trillion company is a software company that's masquerading as a service firm. So essentially, people want outcomes. And nowadays with AI and in our opinion, still humans are important as well, can deliver the outcome in a systematized and productized way. And that's a much better unit economics for the business and much better experience for the customer.
So having a service its kind of outcomes are well defined and clearly defined
Absolutely.
for the buyer. Okay.
Yep.
That's
100%.
fun. And I could see that. And that's really what you've done with Respona, right? And you've managed to make it into a huge success.
Absolutely.
Farzad, I'm going to ask you, what do you think's coming next with AI? You've talked about the productization, but what do you think is coming next?
I think we're all going to lose our jobs sooner or later with the way things are progressing, which is not true. I'm actually an AI optimist. I think that the rate of GDP growth is going to explode, much like it did with the invention of the computer and electricity. So I think this is definitely one of those pivotal moments in history where we're going to look back and look fondly on, because I think it's a development that is going to improve humans, I would say, well-beings in terms of medicine, in terms of the economy, significantly, like we've never seen before. So I'm very optimistic and I'm very excited for the future. But again, people disagree with me. I guess nobody really knows what's going to happen, so we have to wait and see. But my opinion, if you don't know what's going to happen, better hope for the best and hang tight.
Well, I think, as you said, it's a sea change, right? In the same way that electricity or, the internet or mobile phones, and before that, even the printing press and tractors, that came in, the mechanization of farms created huge dislocation, but then much greater yields in crops from the same amount of land. And some people no longer worked on the land, but then they worked in other economic areas that meant that the economies were able to grow. But it does require everyone to be flexible and to innovate, which is plainly what you and Respona have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the kind words. We're doing our best, so fingers crossed. See what happens.
We can see great results. Farzad, if people want to contact you and connect with you, how can they do that?
Best way to contact us is via LinkedIn. So my name is Farzad Rashidi, and there aren't a ton of us out there. So definitely a great way to get in touch with me there. And then also our website is respona.com. That's RESPONA, respona.com. If they want to learn more, they're welcome to visit there.
Well, you've shown me how poorly I'm doing on my own SEO, for which I'm grateful and obviously a little bit embarrassed. But I'm grateful for you coming on the show and really educating me and my friends here on how we can survive. Because the reason I thought this was so important to have this conversation is because a lot of smaller companies and bigger companies, if they are invisible to LLMs, the leads will dry up. And that source of new business has been really fundamentally important to so many companies, especially all those ones that are doing remote work. So
Absolutely.
That's why I really wanted to talk with you about how brand mentions are being affected by LLMs. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Jim. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, it really is. So as always, I'll put all the details in the show notes and I'll include Farzad's contact details and just encourage you to have a think now about your own strategy. It's no longer enough to have a pretty website and to believe that you're going to be found. As we said at the beginning, over 90% of businesses are potentially invisible. And the upside of that is if you're in the 10%, you have the possibility to get the other 90% business. So as with all of these things, as we say in China, every crisis is also an opportunity. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Unnoticed Entrepreneur with me, your host, Jim James. Until we meet again, I encourage you to keep on communicating.